Welcome everyone to the After Service Forum today. I'm Reverend Mary, this is Geoff Willard from Wolf Haven, and delighted to have you here on site and online as well as we talk about The Wild in Us Part 3. So we'll light a chalice because you know that's what we do when we gather. These words are from the Reverend Florence Caplow. Whoop. We light this chalice in honor of the animal realm, furred and hooved, two-legged, four-legged, and many-legged, fanged and clawed, gentle and fierce, wild and tame. May we remember that all animals are our relatives, worthy of our care and respect. So thank you again for being here today. This is a forum to talk about Wolf Haven as a way of accessing, again, in a different way, the wild in us, our theme for today as we enter the week of Halloween. So as Geoff and I have talked, we would invite you to share questions that you might have as we go along. So you can raise your hand if you're in the room. If you're on site, you can raise your virtual hand or your physical hand so Carbon can see you, or you can put your question in the chat and we'll be happy to answer them. So Geoff, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I asked you to just tell us about you a little bit and how you came to be in Washington at Wolf Haven and how you came to be at OUC.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Geoff, Executive Director of Wolf Haven. I've been at Wolf Haven now for 3 years, and I came up from California where I'd spent about 20 years working in the conservation field and had done a master's degree actually in wolf livestock conflict issues and how to prevent them. And so when an opportunity arose to become, an employee of Wolf Haven and eventually the executive director, I really jumped at it. It's basically a dream job for me. The mission of Wolf Haven is to conserve and protect wolves and their habitat. And in many ways, the mission is to realize a lot of what Mary was talking about this morning in the service, as far as finding a way to improve the human relationship with nature and with wild species that rely on us not disturbing them overly and avoiding things like extinction. So, yeah, it's been a long journey to get there, and I feel really happy to have found Olympia and this wonderful community. As far as how I got into the Unitarian community here, I've been a humanist. I would say I've identified as a humanist for probably 25 years or so, ever since I had a really wonderful history teacher in high school who just lit up my realization of our place on this planet and our place in history and our place in time and our ability to affect the future, right? So I've been a humanist ever since then, and I've always been kind of like maybe Unitarian curious, and even attended a Unitarian church a few times when I was living in Santa Barbara, but never really kind of did the full plunge in until I arrived here in Olympia and found this wonderful community, and it's been a real pleasure to become a member. I'm actually doing the membership classes now and really enjoying this process. So thank you for welcoming me.
Thank you, Geoff. Absolutely, you can clap. Yeah, why not? So,
yeah, thank you.
One of the stories I like is the Sunday that I met you. I don't know if it was your first Sunday here, but it was a Sunday that we howled. And I went out and met Geoff, and he said, by the way, I work at the wolf sanctuary. And I said, what? We have a wolf sanctuary. Because yes, we do. So really lovely.
And it was that day when we were here and we did the howl, I was like, wow, I have found my people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Great. So would you say a little bit about Wolf Haven and in particular this transformation that you are a part of taking forward?
Yeah, so how many folks here have been to Wolf Haven before? Oh, wow. Oh, my God. Fantastic. That's most of you. Thank you for having come. How many have been within, let's say, the last 10 years? Okay, it's a much smaller group, and that's very common. So Wolf Haven has been operating at our headquarters in Tenino, just about 15, 20 minutes south of here, since 1982. So it's a long-standing community organization, and as Mary had mentioned earlier, it was founded at a time when we as a society and a civilization have been on quite an evolution as far as our relationship with nature, right? And I would say in 1982 we were kind of on the process of maturing and having a better relationship with species, but at least at the time and in its founding, there was still a little bit of a sense of wolves as almost entertainment for people, and so it really was founded, I think not intentionally, but kind of as it organically developed, it became a bit of a roadside attraction, and I would say the primary intent was to welcome people out to the space to have very kind of loud and fun, entertaining experiences. And maybe that was fine in some ways, but it was quite disturbing to the wolves. And over time, Wolf Haven has, especially in the last 20 years, really evolved to be first and foremost a sanctuary for the animals that are there. And so it's been quite an evolution to get there. Now we still do offer education programs for visitors on the weekends. But they're really framed so that folks know that we are entering the wolf space. We are entering the wolf sanctuary at Wolf Haven when we go in. We keep group sizes really small now. The experience is much quieter. We don't have live music like we used to have, or really bombastic bonfire parties like there used to be. It's now much more of a sanctuary space, a respectful space, entering the home of the wolf, and sharing information about the individual biographies of the animals that are in the sanctuary, and then their plight within the ecosystem and the ongoing incredible success of wolf recovery in the wild. So those are some of the things we talk about when we go inside the sanctuary. And anyway, yeah, maybe I'll just stop there and we can continue on. I do have also some slides that we can share at some point to show you some of the specific animals that are actually living in our sanctuary now. And maybe, pictures speak 1,000 words, so it might be a nice way to kind of get a better sense of what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to do that now?
We could. Yeah, Carbon, do you want to do that? Great, thank you. So just have about 10 slides. We can try to go through them somewhat quickly, and obviously if there's questions at any point, feel free to just interrupt. This is an aerial view of our space. So we have about 80 acres south of Tenino, about a little more than half of which is actually restored and conserved Mima Mound prairie land, which is that prairie space that you see right there. It's a beautiful prairie, a gem in the South Sound as far as what Mima Mound prairies can be. 20 years ago, 25 years ago, it had been covered by Scotch broom, but in partnership with the Center for Natural Lands Management and other conservation partners, we've really brought it back to be an incredible example of native restored prairie land. The sanctuary where the wolves live are in the forested area, kind of in the foreground and the bottom part of that photo. I mentioned our mission is to conserve and protect wolves and their habitat, and we do that across 3 pillars. 1, the sanctuary. 2, our education programs, both in the sanctuary as well as in classrooms. And 3, conservation. We work to support wild wolf recovery, and I can talk more about that. We are, as I mentioned, really leaning into the importance of sanctuary, and so as a way to do that, we have upped our practices in order to meet and even surpass the standards set by the Global Federation of Animal Sanctuaries. They are the international gold standard for what sanctuary care looks like, and we received GFAS accreditation in 2015, and just last year, we were awarded the Outstanding Sanctuary Award winner by the Global Federation of Animal Sanctuaries. We're the only wolf sanctuary in the world to have gotten that. So this is, I think, an example of the fact that Wolf Haven is truly a wonderful local gem in our community that is a world-class example of what quality sanctuary care looks like. So I wanted to give a couple examples of some of the animals in our sanctuary. Here are Pen and Ellie. They are are two rescues. So we have two different populations of wolves in our sanctuary. One is our rescues, and these are animals that are born in captivity, often in the black market pet trade, raised by people. So they cannot live in the wild. They wouldn't survive very long in the wild, very likely, or they would become a problem because they are habituated to people. And so these animals, when they need to be relinquished by their owners, they're either going to be euthanized or they end up in a sanctuary like ours. So we are really rescuing these animals that are in a situation, outside of their control, and they've ended up in this tough kind of living between two worlds. They're not wild, but they're not domesticated, and they don't really have a great place to go other than a sanctuary. So we're rescuing them, and we're providing them with a forever home in our sanctuary where they can live out their days in companionship and with, a sense of privacy and in a naturalistic forested environment. So just as an example, the animal on the left there is Penn. He's a male wolf dog, high content wolf, but also mixed with a dog species. And he had come from a really terrible, abusive situation where for 10 years he lived in a 6x4 cage with a chain around his neck that was attached to the ground. So he had extremely limited mobility. When he was eventually, confiscated by the authorities from his previous owner, he was emaciated and just, had been traumatized by this experience. And when Wolf Haven rescued him, we were able to bring him into a much larger enclosure where he was able to run around on grass and live in companionship with Ellie, who's this other wolf in that photo with him. And even his muscular development was so delayed and prevented from his previous life that it took some time for him to even be able to kind of move fluidly in the enclosure. But now he's gained a lot of strength, he's gained a lot of mass, and he's doing very well. It's incredible to see his kind of behavioral turnaround from where he had come from. So it's a great example of what Wolf Haven is trying to do. But second, we have this other population of endangered species program animals. And these aren't rescues, these are animals that were born in captivity in order to support the recovery of wild wolf species. So specifically the Mexican wolf and the red wolf. So for example, the photo that we see here on the right, the wolf that's in the background, that is Finch. He's an American red wolf. The red wolf is a species that historically lived in the southeastern US. And Finch was born at Wolf Haven with the idea that maybe he could become a candidate for release. We have a hand up. Okay. Do you have more than one pack of wolves at Wolf Haven, or do they regard all of them as one pack? Do both populations mix with each other? Thanks. That's a great question. So, yeah, good clarification that we don't really, I wouldn't say we have packs so much as we keep our animals in companion pairs, male, female. That's a very good, stable way for them to live when in captivity. And so the enclosure sizes vary between a half an acre up to an acre. And we do have one enclosure where we have a bunch of 5 brothers together. So you could kind of maybe consider that a pack. Although in the wild, a pack is truly a family group. It's a breeding male and female and their offspring. That's what a pack is. And so we increasingly scientists and wolf biologists don't even use the word pack so much as just family group. Another question here? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. Family group, so it can be extended family. Sometimes yearlings or 2-year-olds might stick around and support the raising of the next generation of pups. And sometimes maybe a dispersing wolf that's unrelated comes in and joins the pack. So sometimes you have strangers who join the pack. But for the most part, it's a family group. Yeah.
Hey, let me get the mic for you so that other folks online can hear. Sorry, I'm slacking off on my job here.
Hi. Do you know how many captive bred animals you've released back into the wild?
Yeah, it's a great segue back into where I was going. So the exact number, I don't remember off the top of my head, but it's been, I would say, at least 13. We've released 2 families of Mexican wolves out into the recovery area for Mexican wolves in the southwest, Arizona and New Mexico. And then we've released 3 red wolves. So Finch, who's the animal on the right in the back, he's a male red wolf who was born at Wolf Haven in 2016. And last year, he was selected for release by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. These releases are entirely, official, formally done by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And so Finch was sent from Wolf Haven to North Carolina, where the recovery region is. He was released and immediately joined a pack, became the breeding male of the pack. That was the intention. There was a pack that was missing a breeding male. So he joined the pack that he was intended to. And now 2 years in a row, he's had litters of 8 pups each year, a total of 16 animals added to the landscape. And that's the most endangered canid species in the world. So Finch, is doing incredible work to support the recovery of that species. So, you guys all have great questions. I'll just maybe try to cruise through some of these slides. Here, I'm now just sharing a few beautiful photos that were taken at Wolf Haven. This is Guy, a pure gray wolf, captured on a dusky evening. It was very evocative of, I think, the Halloween kind of theme that we've had going with the wild. And so I figured you all might like to see this. Guy had been rescued as a 2-year-old and lived to 15. He actually passed away this past June. So, that is another thing. Inevitably, of course, our rescues do end up passing away, and we have a wolf cemetery where we present the remains of all of the animals from our sanctuary. That's part of our prairie. So if you ever visit Wolf Haven, you'll be able to have a chance to go into the sanctuary if you'd like, and then you can also visit our prairie, and you can see the wolf cemetery that we keep there. A couple other beautiful photos. I really love this one, showing a couple of our gray wolves. Again, showing the forested environment that they have access to. They're able to dig dens as well. Many of the enclosures have a whole network of dens that have been dug over the years, so you can kind of see that in the roots below the tree there. It's a beautiful space, and I would love to share it with any of you who would like to come back. This is an animal who's actually at our Montana site. So in 2018, Wolf Haven acquired a second property in Montana where there were already wolves living there. So we stepped in to rescue the wolves because the former owners needed to get out of that space. So we took over the property, took over the care for those animals. And this is, I just think, a funny photo, but also showing off the incredible jaws and teeth of, the quote-unquote big bad wolf. But another thing that we always try to message is that the big bad wolf is really quite a myth. It's strange that culturally we've kind of set up a situation where wolves are almost some of the greatest villains in many of our fairy tales and in our fear of the wild. Because in actuality, especially compared to other predators, they're actually quite not a threat to us. You could count on one hand the number of people who have been viciously attacked by a wolf in North America in the last 100 years. That's how rare it is. It's extremely rare. They don't like people. They don't want to be near people. In the wild, they'll run away if they smell or see a person around. So it's extremely rare. Only in cases when you have a wolf who's maybe starving to death and just desperate will they potentially attack a person. But it's extremely rare. So this is the last beautiful photo that I was trying to share. This was Nash. She's a female. She's the matriarch of the American red wolf who's still living in our sanctuary now. She's actually, because she's no longer a candidate for release or giving birth in the program, the Endangered Species Recovery Program, she's now on the visitor route. So you could see her if you were to visit Wolf Haven. And she was the mother of Finch, that red wolf that I showed a photo of a few moments ago. So now her grandkids are out on the landscape in the wild and helping support the recovery of her species. And I think her face here is, an example of what I was describing, which is that, wolves are not so vicious animals. They actually are quite sweet and gentle, at least towards us, obviously not towards their prey. But here I think she's showing a bit of concern and shyness, and that's common. That's what we'll often see when we're looking at the animals in the sanctuary. And we do, because our enclosures are large, and we also provide space for animals to retreat. If they ever don't want to be seen by our visitors, that we allow them to do that. They're not forced to be on exhibit. And then here's a photo of just some of our staff team. We have 17 staff. Our animal care team does phenomenal work to care for the animals. And then we work with a veterinary team, Evergreen Vet, here in West Olympia, who support the medical care for all the animals in our sanctuary. And then I think maybe we can segue to the rest of this conversation is one thing that Mary and I have talked a bit about is a new program that we've launched, which provides visitors with a pretty unique opportunity to experience the sanctuary. And this program is called Sanctuary as a Mindset. And so unlike our normal visit where we have folks come out and we have an educational visit inside the sanctuary where we talk about wolf biology and behavior and ecology, instead in this program, we'll invite folks out, we'll provide a very little bit of education before we go inside the sanctuary, just about the animals that are inside. Then we go in the sanctuary in silence. And we just have an hour or two to just immerse in the sanctuary in silence and to practice mindfulness, contemplation, observation, maybe write or draw or otherwise just be and to see the wolves and be with the wolves, as well as the rest of nature all surrounding. We have a whole colony of ravens that live in the trees over our sanctuary, as well as other wildlife. And so if you're interested in potentially having even a group experience within the congregation here, it would be really fun to kind of invite a group out to experience this program together. So, yeah.
So we've talked about having an OUUC sanctuary as a mindset experience. And so if any of you are interested in working with me on that, come and talk with me after, and we'll see about making that happen. We've also talked about having some OUUC tours in the usual tours that happen on the weekend, but to have some that are set aside for OUUC folks, our families. Maybe one of our nature walks will be at the sanctuary or on the prairie, which is just as beautiful, and to really invite this, wild in us and in a group experience in this place that's really made a shift toward sanctuary. So, yeah. So come and chat with me if you're interested in making that happen. The other thing I wanted to ask about, Geoff, is you shared that at this time of year in particular, you have a ritual that you've done at your cemetery. Do you want to speak about that?
Yes, I do. So
the minister in me was really taken with this.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, we have a new tradition that on Halloween, actually, we do a group, all-staff cleaning of the cemetery. So we go out to the cemetery, the gravestones, where we have, Wolf Haven has cared for over 330 wolves in our 43-year history. And we currently have 40 living in Washington still in the sanctuary and another 15 in Montana. So the remainder have passed away. And so they have gravestones in our cemetery. And we go out and clean and honor the past wolves as kind of a Halloween celebration of life, moving into the Day of the Dead. And so this year we'll be doing that this Friday on Halloween Day, on all-staff cemetery cleaning. And then actually we have a film crew who's going to be filming part of it in the preparation for a production they're putting together called Finding Sanctuary Within. Mm-hmm. And they will be filming the cemetery cleaning and then also having a special Sanctuary as a Mindset experience for local animal rights activists on the Day of the Dead, actually, and that will be filmed as well. So this is this year is a extra special experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. So I was really honored to have, when my family from South Carolina came to visit this summer, Geoff gave us a tour of Wolf Haven and the prairie, and I was just really taken with this interweaving of the wild and spirituality, which is what created today, the inspiration for the service and the interview with Geoff, and where might we collaborate as a faith community and a sanctuary. And one of the things that really stayed with me, Geoff, was your language around putting wolves at the center, putting the animals at the center, which is our justice language, right? We put people who are on the margins, we put animals who are on the margins in the center. So I wondered if you just might speak a little bit more about that, and do you get pushback about that? Because sometimes the people in the center don't really like not being in the center anymore.
Right. Yes, very true. So I wouldn't say we get very much pushback from our visitors. I think many of the folks who are coming to visit our sanctuary have one way or another kind of understood what it was they were getting into. We don't often encounter folks who feel like maybe they're coming to a zoo and expect to be able to see all of the animals. because that doesn't necessarily happen, right? So, so thankfully, yeah, we don't experience much kind of pushback in that realm. The area where I say we do have pushback is our conservation work. So, as I mentioned, we have a very active conservation program. We're trying to support coexistence between thriving human communities and thriving wolf communities. As many of you probably know, we do have wild wolves, gray wolves, living in Washington state. They started recovering after having been exterminated 100 years ago. Their wild population started recovering in Washington state in 2008. We had the first wolf come in naturally from the greater northern Rockies population. And they ended up mixing with also a population returning from British Columbia and have now grown to 230 wild wolves in the state of Washington. And yeah, it's a pretty phenomenal natural success story because again, they weren't reintroduced anywhere in Washington. They've just come back naturally. They've spread throughout the northeastern part of the state, now into the central and northern Cascades, and they may be coming into the South Cascades sometime in the next few years. Who knows? And so there's certainly a lot of pushback when we try to work with stakeholder groups about this. Some people are understandably fearful about the idea of maybe living, sharing a landscape with wild wolves, especially those folks who are ranchers or livestock producers, because sometimes wild wolves will get into trouble by attacking livestock and other, domestic pets potentially. So some folks have really, when we try to find ways to have thriving wild wolf populations, there's some folks who push back against that, thinking that, kind of coming back to this idea of us having dominion over this planet, and some folks tend to feel like there's a natural right for us to live in a world that doesn't have wolves. And I would say that that's kind of an extreme perspective. Many of the ranchers that we talk with are interested in finding collaborative, practical solutions for living with wild wolves. But I mean, still, they're a bit fearful about it because sometimes they perceive wolves as threatening their bottom line, which we can understand that can be a challenging spot for someone to be in. But anyway, yeah, there's a lot there, and I'm sure, it looks like we have a couple questions.
I'll go back here and then to you, Jen.
Well, my question kind of goes with just what you're talking about. The Olympics Peninsula historically had wolves, and there's been a lot of talk about the possibility of introducing them. And as I understand it, the tribes say only if they get there on their own. And I don't know how they'll get across I-5 to get to the peninsula. What's your thought on that, like the introduction of wolves to the Olympic Peninsula? Yeah,
great question. So I would say Wolf Haven generally is aligned with what you referred to as the tribal perspective there. There's a number of reasons why translocating wolves may not be a great idea. For example, there's experience showing that when wolves are dropped into a new location, they can be confused and sometimes just die, not really adapting very well to the local conditions, or even trying to run back to wherever they might have come from, which can also be a dangerous journey. And then similarly, when we relocate wolves and put them in a place that they didn't naturally get to, that is also when you can get significant pushback from local communities. So if you have, livestock production, for example, maybe somewhere in the Olympics, adjacent to the national forest areas, for example, those communities would understandably look at active reintroduction as the government kind of coming down on them one way or another, and it can make therefore coexistence practices and the attempts to find collaborative solutions that much harder because you're getting community resistance to just the idea of wolves in general. Whereas when they come back naturally, it's a slower process. There's less of a blame game going on. And so that's where we come down. That said, I mean, there might be some situations when relocation is important, and of course the relocation and translocation of wolves into Yellowstone in the mid-90s was a hugely beneficial thing for supporting the recovery of populations in the Northern Rockies. So it's a complicated question. As far as I-5, yeah, if wolves do get into the Southern Cascades, there's really great favorable wolf habitat in the Southern Cascades, especially around St. Helens and Mount Adams and a lot of the forest land around there. And then Olympic Peninsula has a lot of great favorable wolf habitat too. So it's really about whether they can get over, use a wildlife corridor kind of between those two cores. And yeah, I-5 might be quite a barrier to make that happen, but it's not impossible. We've seen down in California, wolves have crossed I-5 in the Central Valley of California to get into the coastal range. So it's not impossible, but it's harder for them to move that way for sure.
So we got a question back here, a couple. We'll walk the mic around. Thanks, Jan.
I've relocated myself, so fortunately I wasn't moved by somebody else. When I lived on the edge of Chicago in Oak Park, I had coyote in my yard, as did many people. There's a huge rabbit population, and I know that the coyote was there because in the snow, the coyote footprints would go right under the lavender, I'm sorry, not lavender, I get that here, lilac bushes where the rabbits hang out. And also, I saw one in my yard. It wasn't a huge concern for many of us because there are so many rabbits, and we understood that this was part of the food chain. But some neighbors were really upset because they had very small dogs, and they were afraid that the coyotes would take out their dogs. How do you deal with the disparity? How is there justice, I guess, for all with these kinds of issues?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and there's no good, easy answer to that. You know, with coyotes have shown themselves to be incredibly adaptable to urban environments, as you all know. Wolves are unlikely to be quite so, present in urban spaces. Although in Europe, we are seeing some wolves. You know, there are naturally recovering wolf populations in the Netherlands, which is one of the most densely populated, human-populated environments on the planet. So they can be quite resilient and adaptable. But yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that we're trying to do at Wolf Haven through a new program called Wolfwise Communities, which is support communities, especially here in southwestern Washington, to get ready for the potential arrival of wolves on the landscape. And even if they aren't going to be setting up shop here in South Thurston County or something like that, they might, as we said, end up using corridors, local wildlife corridors, to potentially go between the South Cascades and the Olympics. And when traveling on a corridor, they could find potentially a yard where there's a dog running loose and potentially attack that dog, or someone's hobby farm if they are raising some alpacas or other livestock, right? So those are concerns that folks should be concerned about. And what Wolf Haven is trying to do is raise awareness about the fact that wolves may recover regionally here sometime soon, and then try to understand what sort of practices can be put in place to prevent conflicts in the future and keep their pets safe, keep their livestock safe, keep their kids safe, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Maureen, did you have a question?
I wish I could offer more information, but my daughter works for the Department of Transportation.
Yeah.
An ecology branch that's doing some of those reclamation for the wildlife. So like if a road goes through an area and sort of stops the natural traffic of animals, they have redone the road so that the road is raised like on a bridge, and the animal habitat continues underneath that. Do you know much about that? You could talk about it?
I do know a bit about that. Carbon, is there any chance we could put the slides back up? Yeah. Wolf Haven has worked closely with actually staff from the Department of Transportation. Glenn Kalish is our closest contact there to basically do some mapping and research around the wildlife corridors in Washington. So Couple quick maps that I'm showing here. The left side, I know it's probably very hard to see. We won't dwell on them too much, but the left side is just showing where current wolf packs are in Washington, and the light green polygons that you'll see in the Northeast and in the Cascades are where there are wild wolf packs. And then the map on the right is showing favorable wolf habitat in Washington with the bright colors indicating really great wolf habitat. So you can see that in the South Cascades there's fantastic wolf habitat, and also up in the Olympics. And then this last map is getting to your question, and I'm sorry it's hard to see, but basically what we're looking at is work that's been done by the Department of Transportation to identify the best corridors, wildlife corridors, crossing I-5. So if you see the orange stripe on I-5 south of Olympia there, that is identified as one of the 2 best wildlife corridors given habitat conditions that are in existence. And so building an overpass, a wildlife crossing overpass or underpass in that area is really high priority for the Department of Transportation. Because in addition to supporting wildlife, movement, it also can reduce, of course, traffic accidents and incidents, for deer, vehicle collisions, that kind of stuff. And then the green stripe on the southern part of I-5 is the second major corridor where where the Department of Transportation is actively seeking funding, federal funding and state funding for installation of overpasses. So, yeah, it's ongoing, and if those occur, if we're able to get overpasses like the ones that's on 90. Many of you may know about a really successful overpass that's on 90. It's already dramatically reduced collisions and supported. There's a lot of cameras out on that overpass that are showing how actively used by many types of wildlife, predators and ungulates and many others. So they're proven to be quite successful, and if we can get the funding to make these happen, it'll be a huge gain for the local community, I think.
Did you have a question, Elizabeth?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the habitat connectivity and the overpasses you had up there, and the coalition of environmental groups that's working on this is led by Conservation Northwest, and they've done a lot of work with the agencies on this. And so the 2 that you showed up there in yellow and green, the one near here is down near Scatter Creek, and then the one further south is down near Longview. So these have been identified and are in the planning stages, and like you said, funding. So hopefully, cross our fingers, it'll happen in the not too distant future. Who knows? It takes a long time to get the funding together. Yeah. So, but I also have a question about the rescue animals, and are they allowed to breed, or do they need to be neutered?
Yeah, great question. So one of the important aspects of our sanctuary philosophy is that we're not trying to increase the captive-born population unless there's a conservation purpose. So I mentioned the American red wolf breeding that we had done. That was because we were asked by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to breed red wolves with the idea that those offspring may be candidates for release. And in the case of finch, that animal that I talked about earlier, we showed that an animal that was born at Wolf Haven was released and is now successfully reproducing out in the wild. That's great. But as far as the rescue population, these are animals that were born and raised in captivity. They're gray wolves. They're not part of an active reintroduction program. There's no conservation reason to be breeding those animals. And we don't want to just be breeding animals so that they can live in perpetuity in captivity. That's against our philosophy. In many ways, Wolf Haven would, other than the conservation animals, the endangered species, as far as rescues go, Wolf Haven would rather not exist. We would rather have a world where people are not taking wolves and wolf dogs as pets, and therefore there would be no need to rescue animals. And so thankfully we are seeing a decline in the number of gray wolves born and raised in captivity, which is great. That's, we want to see that. We want to see less of that. But we are seeing an increase in wolf dogs being born and raised in captivity, taken as pets. Sometimes those situations can work out fine. Many times those situations do not work out fine, and it's the animal who suffers because they need to be relinquished. Often they will be euthanized if they don't end up in a sanctuary like ours. So long story short, no, we do not breed our rescue population. And as far as preventing breeding, we will either fix the animal so that they can't breed, or what is actually more common is because wolves breed on a very specific timeline. It's basically just late January and February when breeding might occur. We'll just separate animals that haven't been fixed, and then they can live with each other essentially for 11 months of the year with no concern about potential breeding. Yeah.
Yep, Anne?
I'm wondering about, is there any legality involved in owning a wolf dog? And is that, you said that that problem is increasing now? Because I know a woman years ago who had a wolf dog, and she just had scratches all over her arms and everything, and yet she loved this dog to death. And so I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, the legality is it's a whole patchwork. There are some states where it is legal to breed wolves and wolf dogs, and so it's many of Wolf Haven rescues animals from all over the country, and so it's often those states where we're having to have our most active rescue efforts. Here in Washington, it can vary by county. And I don't remember off the top of my head which counties where it might be legal to have wolf dogs, but it is legal in some locations. But it's, at least in much of Washington and many states, it's illegal to be breeding wolves, and so that's why it's often underground, black market.
I have a couple nuts and bolts questions. The first one is the prairie section of Wolf Haven accessible to hikers or bird watching groups? Okay,
Yeah,
so just look up the hours.
It's a great question. So we have a variety of ways you can visit Wolf Haven. One is the sanctuary visit. Those are by reservation. If you ever want to visit the sanctuary, like with your family or friends, you can reserve those online, wolfhaven.org. You can make a reservation there. Those are weekend, Saturday, Sunday visits. The prairie, though, is open to the public, and it's free. And you do not need to make a reservation. It's open. The prairie is accessible basically any time that our sanctuary is open. So on weekends, Saturday, Sunday, basically between 9 and 2, the prairie is open. And we just ask folks when you arrive, and park in our visitor parking lot, just check in the visitor center. We have an open visitor center with also a gift shop. You can pick up some Wolf Haven merch if you'd like. But then you can just tell who's our staff member who's there that you're going out on the prairie. And then there's a path that's accessible. You can walk through the prairie, go check out the beautiful 300-year Doug fir tree that we have here called the grandfather tree, where we have eagles roosting. And then also there's a number of endangered species that are supported by our prairie: Mazama pocket gopher, western bluebirds. We're a potential release site for Taylor's checker spot butterfly. And let me tell you, our prairie in springtime, April and May, is just phenomenally beautiful with all the wildflower displays. So highly encourage you all to come out at that time.
So it's just when the sanctuary's open?
That's right.
Okay. My other question, I'm not sure if it's relevant still, but years ago when I was out there, I was told that probably Department of Transportation or whoever was delivering roadkill, and the ravens and all that. Do you care to comment on that situation?
Oh my gosh. So the community has been incredibly generous to kind of keep Wolf Haven in mind whenever they may see fresh roadkill. So this is a plug out there. Wolf Haven takes, deer and elk, especially if it's fresh, it appears to be within the last 24 hours roadkill. That is great. That's exactly what our wolves would be wanting to eat in the wild. That's what we would most prefer them to have accessible to them. Because otherwise we're, if we have a lack of roadkill, elk and deer, then we're, often feeding, beef, chicken, things like that, which is less what they would be eating in the wild. So we welcome donations. If someone calls us to alert us about a roadkill, we'll go out and pick that animal up. Or if folks, happen to pass a roadkill and have a pickup truck and want to throw something in their truck and take it over to Wolf Haven, we'll take that too. That's great as well. So this has actually become, a really extremely valuable program for Wolf Haven, we obviously save a lot of money on purchasing meat when we're able to, offset a lot of it through roadkill. And so we certainly welcome anyone who's ever aware of local options, and also hunters. We have relationships with a few local hunters who might go out and take out an elk and then maybe take the part of the carcass that they're most interested in, but they can donate the rest of that carcass to Wolf Haven. That's fantastic too. So yeah, please spread the word. And if you'd like, information is on our website about how you can alert us to roadkill. So thank you.
Carbon, do we have anybody online? Okay, Frank? A couple more questions and then we'll close up.
Well, I'm more of I want to make a point, and just wanted to kind of a shout out to our thought leaders of the past, Emerson and Thoreau, who had a great deal to say about the importance of the wild. Thoreau's most famous quote is, "In wildness is preservation of the world." And Emerson wrote about nature as being a source of revelation from God. So, I really support attempts at preserving wildness, and your sermons and ministry about that subject.
Thank you so much, Frank.
Yeah, thank you.
James?
I have a question about wolf vocalizations. In, probably 2006 or 2007, in February, I was outside Missoula, Montana, hiking with my greyhound, and we actually met a wolf. And it wasn't that far out of the city, but the wolf barked, and I didn't feel threatened. I was a little concerned about my dog, but she was smart enough to get the message of the barking, which was, "Don't mess with me." And the wolf went its way and we went ours. Later on, I saw 2 sets of footprints, and wolves have really big feet in the snow. But vocalizations, not much different from dogs, I would assume.
Yeah, it can vary. I would say our wolf dogs might be more common as far as having some barking behavior. That's what we observe in our sanctuary, whereas pure wolves aren't barking so much. They howl an awful lot. Probably a dozen times a day we'll have a full sanctuary-wide group howl go off. It's one of the delights of being able to work at that space. Is even when we as staff aren't inside the sanctuary, we're still hearing the howling going on. So the howling can vary quite a bit. There's different sorts of howls for different sorts of communication purposes, right? And it's something that we and scientists are still learning about. And then sometimes there could be barking, like in the example that you described, of just kind of announcing a threat and a territoriality. That could be some barking behavior that you might see from a wild wolf, but it's not as common as a howl.
Did you have a question? Maybe one more.
Years ago, I took my grandkids to Wolf Haven. Wolf Haven quite a bit, and there was a problem coming up with funding, and it looked like they were going to have to close it down. So I wondered what happened to turn that around.
That's an interesting question. About when would that have been, do you think?
Early 2000s.
Early 2000s, yeah. Well, I've been at Wolf Haven for 3 years, and I was hired on by our previous executive director, Diane Gallegos, who started in 2011, and she led the organization for 12 years. And when she came in, the organization was struggling financially and kind of culturally, and there were a couple high-profile, bad news events that occurred at Wolf Haven from the previous leadership prior to Diane Gallegos that had kind of soured a lot of the local community on Wolf Haven and some of its practices. And again, I wasn't there at the time. I don't know all the details. I just know that the 2000s were a struggle period for Wolf Haven. Diane really turned it around, and it was under Diane's leadership that Wolf Haven, dramatically raised its its practices of care for the animals, really put the animals at the center, the sanctuary philosophy at the center. It's under Diane's leadership that Wolf Haven became accredited by the Global Federation of Animal Sanctuaries and became a model wolf sanctuary, the only wolf sanctuary in the world to have received this accreditation. And it was along that pathway that also she was able to stabilize the finances. And so folks who supported that evolution of Wolf Haven, put their money where their mouth was and started becoming strong members and eventually major donors. So Diane helped increase the major donor base. And so when I came on 3 years ago, Wolf Haven was healthy. But of course, as a 501c3 nonprofit, it's a constant battle to be raising funds, as I'm sure many of you know. So it's Diane then retired, and now I'm the executive director, and I work very closely with our fundraising team to just make sure that we have all the funds in place to provide the very expensive care that we provide for our animals and to grow our education programs and our conservation programs. So I'd be happy to chat more about the details behind all that if you all were interested.
Well, let's see that it's thriving and that tree is still
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, us too. Yeah, well, along those lines too, let me point out that we do publish a quarterly magazine called Wolf Tracks. And it's a beautiful magazine. We work with really excellent professional photographers to capture great images of the animals inside of our sanctuary. And then our staff write articles that are just sharing news updates about what's going on. And so if you were interested in potentially becoming a member of Wolf Haven, it's a small annual membership fee that would then have Wolf Tracks coming to your door. But for all of you who are here today, if you would like to take a free issue, I have a stack of Wolf Tracks over here. Feel free to grab one on your way out. And then also, we do have a couple other publications that could make for great gifts this upcoming holiday season. We have a beautiful coffee table book all about Wolf Haven and its history and the animals that have lived there. And then we also have an annual calendar. And all this is available, on our website if you'd like to check out more information. That's at wolfhaven.org. And all this could be found also in our visitor center. So if you come down and visit the sanctuary someday, you'll be able to see a lot of that, as well as some of our T-shirts and sweatshirts and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Geoff. It seemed to me that Wolf Haven is an example of this evolution that we've been in recognizing the relationship of humans and animals. And you are just demonstrating that transformation so well. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mary, and thank you all for coming out and having so many great questions today.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it.
And Carbon, thank you as always. Great. So as we do, we'll extinguish our chalice. And these are words from Jane Goodall in her book, Reason for Hope, A Spiritual Journey. And I thought of these as Geoff and I were chatting this last week about this conversation. We have a responsibility toward the other life forms of our planet whose continued existence is threatened by the thoughtless behavior of our own human species. Environmental responsibility. For if there is no God, then obviously it's up to us to put things right. Thank you, Geoff. Thank you, Carbon. Thank you all for being here.